Hi everyone, Leanne from Cake and Eat It 3. First of all, I would just start by saying thank you so much for all the wonderful support and thank yous over last week's post about checklist for those wanting to get onto the road. What an astounding response. So thank you very much. This week we're talking about to rent your house out or to sell it. Now, this is one of the main decisions that you're going to have to make when you get on the road. And we hope to give you a little bit of guidance as to what things that you need to consider and how to make your decision and see whether it's viable for you to keep it or not. Now, it's no secret that we are property investment lovers, so we're going to try and show you ways in which you can determine whether you can keep your house. But if you have to sell it, everyone does it differently. We understand that, but it's all about having the right information to make an informed decision. Okay, so basically, to get started, we need to know, what did your property cost you? So how long ago did you buy your property? What did it cost you to actually purchase the property? I.e., you're going to take into consideration things like your legal and conveyancing fees to get into the property, which in Queensland is one of the lower ones of Australia. I've done conveyancing in at least 4 or 5 states, so I am aware of the different fee structures. So you're going to have roughly $1,500 worth it would have cost you to get in there in Queensland. Your stamp duty. On the average $500,000 house in Queensland, your stamp duty would have been about $8,000, not taking into consideration any concessions to first-time owners. And you've got your bank application fees, $600. Your registration fees can be anywhere from $400 to $1,200 in other parts of Australia, even more. So look, we're just going to call it $10,500, which would be bare minimum to get you into that property that you bought. We're going to talk to you about, okay, but let's base all of these figures on a $500,000 home because it's a round figure. Obviously, everyone's going to have had a different circumstance there, but you can do your research and you can find out these figures. It's more important to understand what we're looking for, not the exact figures. So on a $500,000 property, if you had borrowed $400,000 and therefore chipped in $100,000 of your own money, you would have an 80 to 20 LVR or loan to value ratio. So that would mean you currently own 20% of your home. Now, that's taking into consideration a dummy property, obviously, to work out these calculations. But we're just going to show you. So a $500,000 property would have cost you $10,500 to get in there. So we decide, what have we sold it? Because this is the easiest one to work out. Okay, if we sold it, we need to work out what we're going to get from that. So you would ring real estate agents, you would get them to come and do a CMA or a competitive market analysis on your property, which would identify comparable properties in your direct area that are comparable to you. And by comparable, I mean if Joe Blow has a pool and you don't, well, quite clearly he's going to expect to receive a higher amount. So look for like properties. Okay, you're going to get onto realestate.com.au, you're going to get onto domain.com.au to look at previous history of sales in certain areas. You might like to get onto www.onthehouse.com.au. Now, all of these things are just going to give you an idea. Clearly, until a property is sold, you don't know what you're going to get for it, but you need to work out these things to ascertain, is it viable for me to sell the property, or am I throwing away all my hard work? So this is the things that I think we should be taking into consideration when you bought the property. So how long have you been paying off the property, and have you been making principal and interest payments, which more than likely you were. So on a $500,000 property, you'd be paying off in a 5-year period approximately $35,000. Now, if it's going to cost you $10,500 to get in, now we're looking at our exit costs. Commission on a $500,000 property would be approximately $14,245, including GST in Queensland. Queensland has some of the lower commission structures. Now, of course, there's going to be other options. Of course, there's sell it yourself. You know, that we're just giving basic figures to give you an idea here. So your commission will be about 14,245. Your advertising to sell the property, irrespective of which way you go about, will be approximately 1,000. And in actual fact, if you do auction campaigns and everything, it can be in the thousands. But let's keep it real. $1,000 worth of advertising, $400 worth of bank release fees. Now, something to keep in mind, there could be break fees, penalties. If you have a fixed loan and you're going to break that fixed loan, by selling your property within that period it's still fixed, there can be significant penalties, particularly when the interest rates have gone down. And as that's what has been happening over the last few years, please be very wary of that. Okay, so let's just call them basic figures. $15,500 as an approximate. So let's combine the two. 25,000. Okay, it cost you 10.5 to get in. It's going to cost you 15.5 to get out. We're just going to call it 25 because we're keeping it simple. Okay, $25,000 it's going to cost you to get out of that property. So you have to factor that in when actually calculating what you're going to receive for your property as your entry and exit costs to ascertain what the genuine profit you're going to make from selling your home is. Okay, so that will be the sales side. The other thing to take into consideration is, has it finished doing what you set out to achieve? You've bought that property, obviously thinking that it was in a good area, that it may obtain some capital growth. Now, by selling that property anywhere before 10 years, which let's just say historically, that's what they say you should hold a property for, to receive and see genuine capital gains, you're basically throwing away the gain that you've contributed towards. So if you paid off $35,000 over 5 years at a principal and rate, and we did those figures based on 4.5%, which most of you would be on better than that. If you did that and it cost you $25,000 in and out, pretty much you've just thrown $25,000 away from your $35,000 that you've paid off in that 5-year period. Now, let's just keep it all basic because everyone's situation is going to be very different. We're just identifying, make sure you're keeping it real. Work out, are you prepared to throw away that time, that money that you have done by maintaining and keeping that property for those 5 years? Okay, so what about renting the property out? What's involved? Okay, same thing would apply. Call multiple real estates out. Check out what would we receive for this property? What are the comparable properties in the area getting for their rental? Check online again, realestate.com.au, domain.com.au. Check what they're actually being marketed for. Generally speaking, in most CBD parts of Australia, they're pretty non-negotiable now. So you'll be able to get on, see, and again, like for like, oranges and oranges, apples with apples. Make sure you're checking that if it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a garage or a single lock-up garage, that is what you're comparing your rental properties to. Okay, so once you've ascertained what am I going to receive for my property, then you're going to take into consideration what are my mortgage fees? How much is my property costing me? Once you've got your mortgage fee, you're then going to be writing down things like your rates for the property for the year, your insurance, and keeping in mind that you're going to need to get new quotes to include landlord's insurance in your policy. So ring up, get those quotes, get real figures. You need to know, can you afford to do this? So your insurance, rates, water, maintenance of approximately $1,500 a year we'd recommend that you have, basically because, you know, whether you're in the property or renting the property out, maintenance still needs to happen. So you're going to have things like plumbers and electricians, or, you know, hot water systems, or, you know, the list is endless. I mean, goodness, anything can happen. So you want to be factoring in a certain amount that you're going to allocate to the property so that you are prepared with your budgeting, because, you know, when you're on the road, every dollar counts. Okay, so you're going to sit down and be working out, and also to take into consideration, what interest rate are you paying? Is it worthwhile before you stop work to look at refinancing that property? Maybe you have spent 5 years paying it down and you don't need to have lent the larger amount and be paying those mortgage payments on that higher interest rate. Look, there are so many options. We're just going to basically pump them out. You work out which ones are going to work for you. Maybe look at which ones could benefit you. I mean, if you refinance after that 5-year period and you're refinancing down from what may have initially been, 5% in some cases, we've spoken to people. Now you're refinancing and you could go in at under 4 at the moment, like easily under 4. So you need to keep these things in mind. You could look at fixing, okay? Variable versus fixed. We have fixed ours in for periods over the last 20 years that we've been doing this because we've needed to know exact costings. If they go down, they go down. That's fine. We're happy with our decision. You need to be happy with your decision. But keep in mind that while you're on the road, you don't like surprises. Most people don't like surprises when they're on the road. So by looking at a fixed option, and we're not saying that that's best for you, we're saying that by looking at a fixed option, you know exactly what your repayments are for the term of the fixed period that you lock in. So it just makes calculations a lot easier for your budgeting purposes while you are on the road. Okay, so you've got the property, you've found out how much you can get rental for it, you've worked out all your fees and your insurance, and you know your rates and the water, you know how many people you fit into your house. So if you're two adults, 3 children, you know what your water consumption is. Generally speaking, we would say blow that out a little bit because you want to make sure that you're factoring in enough for this. It depends where you are and what your rates are, so I'm not going to go into figures. You know, you pay the rates, so you know what they are. So write them all down. 12 months you want, and you want to be able to know that you're going to be able to afford to have the property for the time that you've chosen to travel. And keep in mind, most people say they're going traveling for 12 months, and it ends up 2 years. So minimum. So, and some never return. So look, keep it real. Put the figures down. Make sure you can afford this. Okay, so once you've worked out these sorts of things, something else to keep in mind is the condition of your property. Before you hit the road, you're going to want to make sure that that property is maintained. Now, we discussed that in the checklist last week briefly, and by maintenancing your property, make sure fences are in good repair, make sure any painting's been done, make sure electrical items like an air conditioner, ovens, hot water systems, they're in a good state of repair. Because do you know what, if you're on the road, and look, it still can happen, if you have an air conditioner go down, that's $2,500 installed, bang, gone. So you need to make sure that you've taken these things into account. Now, buffers, again, we discussed them last week, but make sure you've got a buffer for that for each property that you own, because again, all those things can break. You want to be prepared. No surprises on the road. Okay, so once you've maintained your property, you've got your insurances in place and got your landlord's insurance. You've identified how much rental you can receive for it. The other thing you want to write down is all the fees as a result of renting your property out, what they're going to be. Now, when you've spoken to those real estate agents who have came out and given you a rental appraisal on the property, you want to have asked them, what sort of fees am I going to incur by using you as my property manager? So you're going to be taking into consideration letting and re-letting fees. In Queensland, that's the first week's rent plus GST every time it has a changeover of a tenant. It may be worthwhile going underneath the market rental just a bit to get a better quality choice of tenant and be able to keep that tenant for a long term, which will save you a lot of money in, over the course of the time that you're away. So you're going to have management fees, you're going to have reletting fees, you're going to have administration fees. Basically, you want to ask them for a full disclosure of all of the fees that they can charge you so that you're aware. Something goes wrong, what's going to happen? What am I going to be charged if they need to go to the small claims tribunal on my behalf or defend, a tenancy advocacy issue? Basically, just ask the question, write it down, so then you've got the information ahead of time if something does go pear-shaped. All right, so your maintenance is good on the property. You know how much rent you're going to get. You know what your mortgage repayments are. You know what your insurance is and your rates. You've got it all written down in front of you. Now, rental income, less weekly mortgage may be easier for you to work out. Less weekly mortgage, less all of your rates and expenses divided by 52. And basically, can you afford it? Quite simple. If you can, we strongly recommend that you consider doing so. Now, when you're finished traveling, what's your plan? By having a property, irrespective of whether that property is in a location that you end up coming back to, is irrelevant. By having a property and keeping your foot in the door of a lending or financial market, it gives you many more choices. So let's say you do want to come back. Great, the house is there, the tenants leave, you move in, all good. Maybe you found somewhere else that you would rather be. You then have multiple choices. You can either choose to keep the property that you already own, take the equity that is in the property. At this stage you had 80-20 on our demo, but you may actually have quite a lot more equity in your property by this stage, particularly if you kept it P&I for the time that you're away, principal and interest payments off your mortgage. So by doing these things, when you come back, you can actually look at retaining that, keeping that then as an investment property, buying another one in the other location where you've chosen to settle down for any period of time, generally not too long when travellers have got the bug. But you can then decide to have both the properties. You can sell that property and use the money in a bridging finance scenario to then go into where you choose to reside. Having travelled the whole of Australia, there's many, many, many beautiful places that you may choose you'd rather be. So, options, that's all it's about, choices. And when you get back, you may not, I even know people who have had trouble having rental accommodation because they've been on the road for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You don't have a rental history or a current rental history. So keep these things in mind now, that by having that property, it gives you credibility in the financial sector to be able to even get additional lending, to then sell it, bridge it, finance it, to make sure that you don't lose contact with being in that financial market. So if you have sold that, you have to then try and get back into a workplace, which is fine. That's no big deal. You can find work anywhere. But you need to get that stability back in. You need to get the credibility to prove your financial situation to the bank. Lending criteria is becoming more and more stricter. So keep those things in mind. So basically, if you sell, you've lost your only asset that you've spent however many years maintaining, paying down, and looking after. Not to bricks and mortar. Don't be thinking emotions. Don't be thinking, my kids grew up in that house or what have you. We have one of our houses that did have both our kids pretty much grow up in them. They're just bricks and mortar. So literally the only thing you want to do is put these figures on paper, work out, can I afford it or can't I? Speak with a broker if you think that refinancing may be an issue, and you want to be doing that before you give up your work or your credibility of your long-term employment. So all of these things need to be considered. If you still choose to sell, so be it. You make the decision that is best for you. There's no right or wrong answers. We just wanted to give you an indication of the sorts of things that you should be considering to make the best decision for your family. So let us know what you guys decided to do. Did you sell everything? Hit the road? How's that worked for you? Whack a comment below to help others trying to make the same decision. When you got back, did you find it hard to get back into the market? Did you sell up, think it was great, didn't have to worry about it? Everyone has a different risk level. And some people just won't sleep at night if they know that they've got these the stresses of renting a property out. Understand how you feel about your situation and whether it can work for you. Something else to consider, if you are really close to the wire with your finances and being able to keep it or not, and irrespective if you sell or you rent the property out, own your rig before you go. We cannot express that enough. Whether that be a camper trailer, a caravan, a camper van, a motorhome, whatever it is, and however you have made this work to hit the road, try and own your rig first. And if that means a delay in your leave date, so be it. You'll be so thankful. Any bad debt must be removed before you leave. And by bad debt, that is a non-income producing asset. So your credit cards, your store cards, your personal loans, car loans, rig loans, whatever. You want as much of that gone as you possibly can. It will make your trip that much more enjoyable. Obviously, it's not going to be possible for everybody. Just keep it in the back of your mind. If you have to delay a couple of months and really smash it out, it will be very, very worthwhile to do so. Until next time, next week, we're going to keep it a little bit more light-hearted after 2 weeks of intense subjects. We're going to do board games. We have a very wonderful tip for you that worked for us to get the maximum amount of board games in the smallest amount of space. So see you next week. Thanks for your support, and signing out for Cake and Eat It 3.